Professor Michael, I would like to welcome you again to the Antonin University, and I would like to thank you again in the name of the university for taking part of the Wellness and Mental Health Week in its third edition. We really appreciate your contribution and your presence, and thank you for joining us from Canada. I think it's early right now, right?
A little bit. Well,
Yes,
7:30.
it's a little bit early because usually when we have speakers from Canada joining us, they take the slots of 5, of 7. I was surprised when I saw 2:30. I was like, okay, he's an early bird, I think. So thank you again for joining us. I will leave it to you now to do your presentation, and we can leave the questions until the end if anyone would like to learn more about anything. So thank you again.
Perfect, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for inviting me and having me with you for this wonderful initiative. So, what I'd like to touch on today is kind of more the collective side of well-being, how it's possible to help each other reach more social justice, and how through reaching more social justice we can reach more well-being for others. So just to introduce myself, let's say a bit less formally, or a mix of personal and more public stuff. Yes, I'm a professor at Simple University, School of Transformative Leadership and Spirituality. So Simple is a small Catholic university, smaller than the Antonin University, actually, located in Ottawa, Canada. So on unceded Anishinaabe territory. The Anishinaabe are part of the first people of the land that is now called Canada. I'm a sociologist of race and ethnic relationship by training, and I'm also a researcher specializing in equity, diversity, and inclusion in NGOs. So, how can we make organizations, especially nonprofit, more fair, more diverse, for everyone to find a voice, a space within those organizations? I'm also the son of dairy farmers from French-speaking Canada. So, you will guess the accent at some point. And also the husband of a Moroccan wife, and the father of a wonderful 4 years old. So he was there a moment ago. Maybe he will show up during the presentation. If he does, well, I will introduce you. You know what it is with 4 years old kids. It's a pleasure for me to be here today and to share a little bit about some insights about allyship. And so really the goals for me for roughly the next 45 minutes before we get to have a bit more of a Q&A discussion together is first to define what I mean by social justice through a diversity, equity, and inclusion framework, to explore what is allyship and the various shapes it can take, some more interesting, some a bit less interesting, to say the least, and to explore a few strategies to make a difference in the lives of equity-seeking groups, of basically groups that are historically more marginalized within society. And so the program, the first step will be for roughly 5 to 10 minutes to define what I mean by diversity, equity, and inclusion, just to make sure that we're kind of all on the same page. Then we'll look at allyship. What is it? How does it work? And a brief conclusion about inclusive leadership and how, as inclusive leader, we can make a difference for our collective well-being. But before getting there, I'd like to use a software. It's called WooClap, and it's very useful to ask you online questions. So if you're good with QR codes, you can simply connect right away to WooClap. If not, I will put in the chat um, a link. So you can click on this link to log into the WooClap platform online. And through this platform, I will be able to ask you a few interactive questions just to get to get to know you a bit more. So basically, you will need to leave Teams. You click on the link. It will open your web browser, or you copy paste the link in your web browser, and then it will say no vote currently ongoing. Please keep up, something like that. Perfect. I see already 10 are connected. That's great. 19. Perfect. So you have the link in the chat. Keep logging in, and I will ask you a first question. So here we go. So here is my first question. What is your status at Antonin University? Are you a student, a professor, support staff, a professional, a member of the administrator, of the admin, the leader, an alumnus from another institution, or you're not part of Antonin University? And if you're not part, you're most welcome in that presentation. I just wanted to target a bit more my audience, not to target, but to know who you are. So wonderful. So most of you are either student or from outside the Antonin University. Perfect. Again, you're all welcome. We'll explore strategies that can be used in an academic setting, outside of it, in NGOs, in your family, in your day-to-day life. It doesn't matter. Although I will pick some examples a bit more in the academic setting. So here is my next question. What is your main field of work study? Are you more into natural sciences and engineering? Are you more into health sciences, into human sciences, including education science and business, or more into the humanities, music, arts, languages, philosophy, or none of the above? Perfect. So lots of people from human sciences and from humanities. Okay, well, that's a crowd that I know pretty well. Well, not you individually, but those sciences. So we'll explore that a bit more, keeping that background in mind. Perfect. My next question, my third question, I have five questions. Which of the following historically marginalized group, if any, do you belong to? Are you a woman, a person of color, a member of the LGBTQ plus community, someone with a disability? Are you from the working class? Are you a religious minority in Lebanon, or are you part of another historically marginalized community? Perfect. So lots of women, um, two people of color, a few people with disability, a few from the working class, two from religious minorities, and other groups. I did not list all the possible markers here, but it's good to know who I'm talking to. And you know, for those who are part of marginalized group, you start with an advantage here because we'll be talking of situations that you already know, that you experience, maybe somewhere traumatic in your life, and that's a plus. I mean, I don't want anybody to suffer, but being part of a somehow marginalized group helps to understand what other marginalized groups are living, are coping with. Perfect. And I think it's not my last question. It's my fourth one. Um, so we'll do a word cloud this time. What does the term allyship make you think of in two or three words? And you can put those three words together and then press enter or submit, something like that. Perfect. So far we got support that is hitting very strongly, connection with the other, interaction, collaboration, otherness. Um, it's moving, helping, supporting, collaboration, sportsmanship. Yeah, it can refer to sports too. Um, teamwork. And so that's great. We're already on the right track, on the right field of allyship being about relationship to make a difference in the life of others, which are creative, positive relationship that can be about support, about friendship, about collaboration, connection, acceptance. That's great. And let's go for one last question, which is, what do you hope to gain from this webinar in 2, 3 words? So far we get a stronger sense of allyship, I guess working with others, developing relationships, new knowledge, new understanding, new strategies, more information, more flexibility, more connections, ability to cooperate. Um, that's what we'll do well in the 30 next minute. Perfect. Thank you everyone for your generous participation in this survey. So let's start with a little bit more. Well, it won't be that theoretical, but just with an overview of what I mean by diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how I tie that to social justice. So we can see social justice as aiming for a more even distribution of wealth and opportunities in society, to create a society where we can level the playing field, where everyone can thrive. And diversity, equity, and inclusion is one way to think about this challenge of leveling the playing field, of making society more fair. And it's a paradigm that has been taught basically for organizations. It started in the private business realm. Nowadays, it's also very common in especially in North America, in the academic world, and more NGOs are also thinking in terms of diversity and inclusion as a way um, to bring about social justice in the workplace, in the place in the academia, or in the place of study. And so I'd like just to review in 5 to 10 minutes what we're talking about. And so when we think in terms of diversity, well, the world is very diverse. Society is diverse. Will to some extent all different from one another. But when we look at diversity in organizations, we're thinking about who is there and who's missing, and diversity can be defined not in a so much abstract way, we are all different from one another, but can be defined through attributes that a group uses to pose some people as normal and others as different. So my understanding of diversity is strongly rooted in my sociological understanding of the world, in relationship of powers. It's not all identities that are the same. Some may be very invisible, those may be very visible, and because of who you are, you won't have the same privileges or the same chance in life. I'm a white, heterosexual Christian man. That put me in my society in Canada at an advantage. And it would be different if I was a Muslim woman um, with disability or without disability doesn't matter, or my challenges would be even greater if I was with disability. So diversity is about identity, and identity that would put you as part of the mainstream, and other identities that would put you as different. And if we want to classify those different type of identities within your school or within your NGO or within your workplace, we can think of some diversity identity as related to internal, that you have little to no control over. You cannot control your age, your gender, your sexual orientation, your physical or mental ability, your ethnicity, or your race. Some other marker of diversity are a bit more, we call them external, which means that you have partial control over them. Not that much, but I mean, you can have over life, if you're a bit lucky, you have control over your income, or you can have control over your level of education if you get more education, or if you get more work experience. If you switch from one religion to another, that's something that you can have partial control over with, and that can also make a difference in the way people see you. And finally, the third level is about organization. So your position in an organization is making a difference. Are you unionized or not? What is your level of seniority? Have you been there for a long time, or are you kind of a newcomer? Are you in a management position? Are you working at a in the periphery of the organizations or in the main office? All this is making can make a difference also in the way people see you. So when we think in terms of diversity, we're really asking the question, who is represented and who's not? Who can move ahead in the organization or not? Who gets the management position? Is it, do all the managers look like the same, being male from a certain background, or is there space for diversity within the management? And asking that is to ask questions about power. and we can think of power in intersectional terms. So again, if you live downtown Beirut, you're wealthy, and you speak English, you're much more privileged than if you live in the countryside, um, you're uneducated, and you are dark skin color, for example. So diversity is about who we are as a community, but who stand the most chances to succeed and to be represented in institutions. And as we move on to know what's happening and who is represented and who's not represented, we can start asking questions about equity. How does our organization, our school, our NGO work in such a way to privilege some and to harm other? Even though the status quo may seem very neutral, the way most institutions work is at the advantage of some and at the disadvantage of other. And so when we think in terms of equity, we're asking, okay, what are the obstacles within my organizations? What are the barriers that maintain inequities across groups? Um, for example, if we're thinking in terms of job posting, are the job in my NGO or in my school being offered to a wide array of people, and people can get hired based on their qualifications, or are most jobs through networks? And I know this guy who's working there, I know this girl who's working there, so it's easy to get the job. That's happening everywhere, but this is working at the advantage of people who are already there, and most often to people who already are more privileged. And so when we're thinking about equity, we can think in terms of how do existing process favor some group instead of others, or are there a bias built in those processes? And when we think in terms of internal processes, for example, if we're thinking about the academia and how assignments are handled to students. Is it, are we through a formula of equality? We give the same assignment to everyone. That's all. Whatever your background is, even if you have some kind of disability, or are we thinking in terms of how can we be more flexible? How can we adapt to different kind of people? If someone is having ADHD, do we give more time to pass the exam, or do we have the option for a different kind of assignments? This is kind of moving through a more of an equitable paradigm where we adapt a bit more to people who are not coming from the same background in a society where equality may be there in theory, but often not there in practice. And finally, the last question is about inclusion. And inclusion can be defined as individual empowerment, as an experience of empowerment. And to be included, we need to fulfill two very basic human needs. The first one is the need for belongingness. As human beings, we long to be part of a community, to be part of a whole, to feel that we're connected to others, that we are not alone. But at the same time, we also long for others to recognize our own identities, our uniqueness, how we are distinct from others, and to be truly included in any given institution, we need this mix of both belonging to the community and to the whole, but for others to recognize that we are different, that there's things, identities that are unique to us. And so we can articulate those two big fundamental needs to build a typology. And so if you are in a scenario where you cannot belong and nobody is seeing you as different or unique, you're in basically an exclusion scenario, you're marginalized. That's not interesting at all. If you're in a scenario when you cannot really belong, but we feel that you are so unique and so precious, but I mean, you don't have any impact on the decision making, you cannot move ahead, but oh gosh, that we're happy to have you. It's like having a black woman on a board of governors, for example. That is differentiation, more broadly called tokenism. That's not a very good scenario either. The flip side of it, assimilation is no better. In assimilation, you can really belong. You're so part of the whole, but you cannot be yourself. You cannot reveal your identity. If you have a disability, if you're part of sexual minority, you cannot reveal that for fear of not belonging anymore to the collective. So you need to assimilate to and we are in a kind of a melting pot dynamic. That's not inclusion. Inclusion is really about the fruit salad for you to be able to bring most, or yeah, ideally all of who you are in an institution, and to feel that you're part of the whole, that you can be part of decision making, that you can talk about your weekends, about your family, that you can get some kind of flexibility if you have special needs. That is inclusion. That's not easy to get there. And so when we think in terms of inclusion, we're asking questions such as, who feels like an insider? Are you able to feel like an insider in your organizations? Do you have an influence on decision making? Can you be fully yourself when you go to work or when you go to school or even in your family when you meet others? Can you be yourself, and do you allow others to be yourself? Um, the literature shows us that there are three basic obstacles to inclusion. Um, the first one is self segregation, and that is something so human. We're all trapped into that. Individuals are attracted to people who look like themselves. You will go to people of the same gender or of the same race, of the same class, because you share similar experiences of living together, of what it is to live in society, of growing up in a certain setup. And so it feels more comfortable. Our brain are wired to go towards people who look like ourselves. But involuntarily, that's also a way to self-exclude and to exclude other when we only go meet people who looks like ourselves. Another big obstacle to inclusion is communication apprehension, especially when we are in a cross-cultural setting. You know, getting in touch with people who are different from you, especially if they are coming from a different culture, you will need some kind of skill set. You will need to develop a sensitivity to that culture, to sensitivity to the references, to the language, and that's not easy, especially in the context of political correctness. Most people just prefer to shut up and say nothing instead of saying the wrong thing because they don't know the other group and they don't know how to interact. So a big challenge when we're talking about inclusion is to accept to make mistakes, and we'll come back to that. And finally, the last level, which is a bit more problematic, but we're all stuck again into that, is about stereotyping and stigmatization. Um, how do we deal with our bias? We all have those images in our head when we think of such a group in XYZ terms, or the other like this. Westerners are arrogant, white male are violent, that kind of stuff. uh, how do we deal with that? It's through experience, and it's through getting to know the other that we can undo those labels. But we're stuck with that, and unless we do some kind of voluntary work to go over those prejudices, those spontaneous images we have about others, um, it's a trap. It's easy to fall into this kind of generalization, simplification of others trap. And so, what's the work of allies into all of this? How can allies make a difference in terms of equity, in terms of diversity, in terms of creating more inclusion around themselves? That's what we will explore for the next 15 minutes, roughly. So first, a definition. Sorry, university professors, we always need to cut things into pieces and to define them, but that's a bit helpful when we have a good definition. So I'm using this following definition from Saad. Allyship is the active, consistent, and challenging practice of unlearning and re-evaluating, in which a person in a position of privilege and power seeks to operate in solidarity with a marginalized group. So first, it's about learning and especially unlearning. It's about seeing things a bit differently and from the perspective of people who are not from our social, did from the same social group, that did not share the same daily reality. And you want to do that in solidarity with people that do have less power in society. Allyship is not an identity. It's not a price. It's not something you win. You cannot tag yourself as an ally on Facebook. It's a lifelong process of building relationships. It's really important. It's something that you build over time, being in touch with people who are living some different kinds of oppressions, of marginalization. And this process is based on trust, on consistency, and on accountability with those same marginalized individuals that will act as guides to their own reality. And finally, allyship is not self defined. It's not you who define yourself as an ally, but it's through work and efforts that are recognized by others, by marginalized groups, that you can become an ally. That's up to them to tell you that, oh, you have been an ally in that situation or in this situation or in many different situations. And so allyship, the starting point of allyship is really about acknowledging who you are and your privilege in society and other people that may not be as privileged, and how you can be present, how you can assist them, how you can make a difference. But there are many traps surrounding allyship. And that's why I'd like to go over three different types of allies, and some that might be very helpful for marginalized people, and other who might not be as helpful for marginalized people. So um, if allyship is a process, it's something that we can learn, and it's something that do take some time. And most people start with the position of aspiring allies for self-interest. Basically, you are an ally because you care about someone around yourself. It's not so much that you want to change society as a whole or that you care about society as a whole, but you may be caring about your sister, about your wife, about your brother, about your friend who is sharing uh, having a marginalized identity, and you want this person not to be hurt. So that's a good starting point. But there are some trappings when you're an ally only for your self-interest, and we'll come back to that in the next slide. Um, Another possibility or another ally identity, or let's say second step, is to be an aspiring ally for altruism. So you're in allyship with a group because at some point you realize that you were privileged and you feel guilty about that. And you want your group, or in my case, white male, to be aware of their privilege. And to some extent, you try to save the others. You try to save, let's say, people of color. I was at that stage at some point. I told you at the start, my wife is Muslim. She migrated from Morocco, and oh gosh, that I was angry when she was discriminated against. So I started as an ally for self-interest, and at some point, I started to discover that, well, what she was living was racism and Islamophobia. And it's not only Salima who's living that, but basically all Muslims or racialized people in Canada are facing that situation. So, but at some point, I was more an aspiring ally for altruism, and I did that because I felt guilty. I wanted to do the right thing, and I wanted to be praised and accepted by people who were themselves Muslims or racialized. But let's say the ideal scenario is to be an aspiring ally for social justice. And it's when you start to realize that, oh gosh, It's the whole system that is broken. The old system is oppressing some people, and this is not good for anyone. It's not good for dominant groups, it's not good for subordinate groups. So we need to change to fix the system, and that's why we start thinking in terms of social justice, um, for all. And so if we look at those different scenarios very quickly in more detail, um, when you're in a life for self-interest, your basic motivation is more selfish. You think about someone you care about and you want to make a difference. I want to make a difference for my wife or for my son or for my friend. And you're an ally to someone. And but the problem is that your relationship with the oppressed groups are more kind of working over them. It's not so much working with them, but over them. I know the solution to make this go away and to make their life easier. So it's you're again in a kind of domination position. It's not that great. And the focus of the problem is individuals. I want just to look at the bad apples in the basket. I want to look at those, racist bastards that are discriminating against people I love. But I do not realize that racism is part of the system. And so my view of justice is about let's act on a few incidents of hate, or let's look just to make the justice system a bit better, because we're just dealing with a few exceptions to a fair system otherwise. And your position as an ally is a bit arrogant because you don't make mistake. You're a good person. It's just those few bad apples. So you're not really questioning who you are. You just make a difference for a few people, so you don't see your privilege in the system. When we move to a position of allyship for altruism, it's already a bit more broader. There's a bit more spaces. Um, and we want to make a difference for a target group, for much more people. And so it's not that we are working with members of that group, but we are working for them. So it's a bit better, but there's still room for improvement. And you start targeting member of the dominant group, which isn't bad because you want to raise their awareness of what's going on. And you realize there's a need for justice, but not necessarily justice for all, justice for a specific group that has been targeted, that is the subject of oppression. And so but it's still difficult for you to admit that you make mistakes. Critiques are not easy to take. You may start listening a bit more to people criticizing you and your own positioning, but it's not that easy because you feel so guilty about your privilege, and you simply try to distance yourself from your privilege. Oh no, I'm not like those bad white people, but still you're a bit stuck in between. And so the ideal position to me to move forward is when um, you are able slowly but surely to become an ally for social justice. So you understand that it's part of your self-interest to make things different, but you also want things to be different for marginalized people and for society as a whole. And you're not only an ally for a group, but you can be an ally to an issue. Let's say, let's struggle against systemic discrimination. Um, you are working with members of the target group. So they are helping you to understand what is the way forward, what's the best way to make a difference in their life. You're not assuming that I know how to solve the problem, I know how to save other. No, people who are living racism, or are living with classism or ableism know the reality, know what could make a difference in their life. So you stop talking and you start listening, and you understand that the system is broken. We need to fix the system. Maybe the education system, maybe the justice system, many systems are in need of fixing. And you're seeking justice, uh, of better justice for all. And when you receive critiques, you see them. It's not easy to receive criticism, but you start seeing them as a gift, as an opportunity for growth, as a way to work on your own liberation, as a way for you to see reality with a bit less biased eyes. And you start acknowledging your privilege and using those privilege to make a difference in the life of others. You start speaking up a bit more in circles when you have privilege and to people that you know will listen to you to make a difference for people who might not be listened to or might not be heard. And so, and I'll finish this part on this. Um, what can you do? Well, basically 6 steps. The first one is if you want to be an ally for others, you need to be aware of your motivations. Why do you want to help? What is your goal behind that? Do you want to make a difference in the life of someone? Do you want to make a difference in the life of many? How do you understand the situation you want to act with? Uh, you want to act to change. And a second step is to stop trying to save or fix others. You're not there to fix them. You're not there to save them. You need to get to know them, to get to know the reality, what it is to be a racialized woman, what it is to live with disability, what it is to be gay, lesbian, or transgender in Lebanon today, and to see their daily reality and their way of seeing the world, and to understand the obstacles they are facing and how they would like things to be different. And to do that, you need to self-educate about privilege and oppression, to understand a bit more the various systems of oppression operating in your society. We can be talking about sexism, about heteronormativism, about ableism. How does it work? How do those systems favor you or not? You may be well discriminated by those systems. Most people today are women, so um, male domination, patriarchy is working against you, but you might be privileged in other sector, on other identity markers. So you need to understand how oppression work, um, and how it favor you or not, and how it's hurting others. And then the more you start talking with people, discovering their reality, there's a real need to be humble, to accept that whereas as you and I are stepping outside of our comfort zone of groups that we know so well, we will make mistakes. And people might correct us from time to time. That's normal. That's part of the learning process of what it is to become an ally. And the more you start to know about them, about the reality, then you can step up and act a bit more. So and you can start filling what I call filling the blanks. You can inquire about what others think, especially when they don't speak up in meetings, or if when you acknowledge that they might be, having a hard time with a professor in their classes, or hard time with their boss or with some colleagues. You can start asking some questions about that to better understand the situation, and from time to time to take a stand. And you can also support and open doors for them. So help connect people, share information with them, introduce them to different people, help them to get on board with new initiatives, a real something that is really important to help people moving forward in their careers, access to networks and access to information. So being an ally is also about sharing what you know and what you have with others. And finally, the last step is about calling out micro and macro aggression. So when you see something happening in front of you that isn't fair, you may find a way to speak up about uh, what is happening. It can be simply a way to show that you don't agree with what's happening, or the way some people has been targeted. It can be to have a one-on-one conversation with someone who had racist uh, uh, words about someone, or sexist words. So there's many different ways to start uh, intervening when you see situations that are not acceptable. And being that is also acting as an inclusive leader, is a way to make a difference in the life of others, and to their own well-being. And I will then end on that with two short slides. Um, when we think of inclusion in our organization, we're thinking about something that is happening at various levels. It's something that you live in your individual relationship. It's something that is happening at the level of your department, of your teamwork. It's something that your leader may be practicing. It's something that the organization as a whole, through different policies and practices, may be practicing. And finally, it's something that the society, the government, has a role to play with. But there's no need to be an inclusive leader to wait to have a management position. Of course, most inclusive leaders, at least theoretically, are people with a management position, but you don't need the management position to be an inclusive leader. You just need to start caring about what other people are experiencing. You need to be an ally in a nutshell. And doing that can make a huge difference. And that's my final slide. Studies show that when in an organization a leader is starting to act uh, in a more inclusive way, caring more about people, about where they are coming from, about their background, about the issues they are facing, about their life circumstances, it can make a huge difference in the well-being of others. We know that it's a solution to get more psychological safety. It's also helping with work engagement. People are more committed. People feel more well. They are happier to come to work because they have a space to breathe and to be themselves. They start to be more creative and innovative because they can take risk. And the first risk is talking about who they really are and not just going with the flow and molding with people around themselves. They develop more helping behaviors. Um, they are learning more for failures first. They admit more that they make mistakes because they know that their leader will be more welcoming of those mistakes. And then they can learn more from those same mistakes because they can admit them publicly. And finally, that is something that is good for work performance too. So there's really a lot to gain, even though it might be a long journey for some, in being more inclusive when we think in terms of leadership and being more inclusive through our allyship with people around us. And that's my final and promotional slides. If you're thinking at some point about studying abroad, at Simple University, we do offer both a graduate diploma and a master degree in transformative leadership and spirituality. So if you want to know more about that, well, please check our webpage, usample.ca, and you can also reach out to me. And I will stop there to leave us with a good 10 minutes for a discussion.
Thank you so much, Professor Michael. It was lovely. I really enjoyed the presentation, and I think everyone did because they were sharing their reactions and hearts on the screen. So I think they did enjoy it. I don't know if anyone has a question. If you wish to raise your hand or type it in the chat box, we still have a couple of minutes. If anyone would like to learn more about any idea that was discussed by Professor Sega. Meanwhile, I will be sending in the chat box a feedback survey. Please, for the attendees, take a minute to fill it in, and Professor Segan, I will share it with you later on once we receive the responses.
Wonderful. Thank you. شكرا جزيلا.
Oh, thank you. I don't know, does anyone have any question? They're just sharing their thank yous in the chat box.
If you have feedback, if you think that some of those slides may sound a bit unrealistic or how to apply that in different situations, I'm sorry I went over that pretty fast, but all questions or comments are welcome.
Okay, they are still sending their thank yous. We have Ms. Amma saying very constructive and meaningful for Lebanon, especially the change seekers. Exactly. Okay, so I think with that, we have reached the end of the session. Of course, and if anyone would like to ask later on anything to Professor Sega, please feel free to share with us the question and we can definitely share it with him. Or if you don't mind Professor Sega, they can email you directly. It's based
Yeah,
on your
of course.
preference. Okay, and for those who are asking for the recording, please email us on wellness@ua.edu.lb. The session was recorded, so of course we can share with you the recording via WeTransfer. Okay, so and Prof. Sega, if you wish to have the recording of the session, also I can send it to you.
Perfect. Well, I may have a question before we leave.
Yep, of
That's a bit
course.
unusual for the speaker to ask the question,
No,
but
feel free.
how is DEI in Lebanon? Is it something that that you are talking more about? Do you talk about that in the university realm? How is it?
Talk about what exactly, ally?
Diversity, equity, and inclusion. Is it
Actually,
something? Yeah.
actually, one of our values at the university is diversity.
Okay.
So we are really tackling this point at the university, make sure that everyone feels inclusive. Also, part of our mission at the HR department is to have 3% of our employees with disabilities. So we are trying to have more inclusiveness, more diversity, etc. It's part of our mission and of our values at the university.
Yeah.
And of course, being from a country that has several religions and sects, we welcome
Yeah.
everyone. We are not limited to a certain religion. So
Wonderful. Wonderful.
we
Thank you.
have Miss Valencia. She asked, your suggestion is mostly for the leader. What about for the marginalized group?
That's a very, very good question. Thank you for asking it. I think that one thing that can certainly make a difference for marginalized people is to find a way to gather and share together what they are living. It's a good way to help break the silos of isolation so that people can understand that what they are living is not because of who they are, but it's because of the system. And as they get to connect with one another and identify what they are living as women, who as sexual minority or religious minorities, they can also better understand, yes, the system, but who might be their allies and who they might be working with to slowly but surely make a difference. And I mean, the burden of changing the system, of course, do not lay on the shoulders of marginalized people, but for them to understand a bit more their situation. I mean, they are people are really aware of what they are living, but just to share it with others, help it to expand the scope of what is happening and sometimes be a bit more helpful or simply to find some friendship and have to laugh a little bit about those situations to make them less traumatic sometimes.
Okay. Thank you so much again, Professor Michael. It was
Yep.
lovely connecting with you, even if virtually. I hope that someday we will welcome you in Lebanon at the university. And
Okay.
we are looking forward for future collaborations. Thank you again. Sorry for waking you up that early.
Oh, no,
But
no, no, that's okay. That's okay. You were right. I'm a early bird, so that's good.
yeah, that's great.
I
Okay,
wanted
that's
to
it.
start my day in good company, so
Ah, that's great. I hope you started with on a positive note and that you are good to go now for the day. I wish you a very fruitful day. Thank you so much again for your intervention and looking forward to connecting with you again.
wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.